Well, I'm excited to welcome to the show Doug Howarth. How are we doing today?
Great, Matt. Thank you so much for having me. It's my great pleasure to be on your show. It's great. I appreciate it.
Well, I always get excited when I get to have conversations with people who are, one, way smarter than me, which you check that box, and two, who have really interesting and exciting and out of the box ideas and experiences, and you have all of those boxes checked. So thank you for coming on the show today. And for those that don't know, a little bit about you, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about hypernomics and how that might
Okay.
apply to investors and business owners and
Sure.
along those lines. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I used to grow. I grew up 12 years in the Midwest, and then went to the Northwest for 11, and I've been down here in California ever since. And I worked for Lockheed Martin Skunk Works for 31 years. I was the production manager for the F-117 stealth fighter for a while. And then I migrated into their cost group, their parametric estimating group. And then I left and I founded this company called Hypernomics. And I've been doing that for the last dozen years. And during that time, we've created a patent. So we have an invention that we came up that's based on the math, and 13 peer-reviewed papers, and a book that just came out this year. So and then clients including NASA, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon Technologies, Virgin Galactic, places like that, and a local restaurant down the street. So
You got some of the big blue chip companies, and you also some of the locals, right? That
some of the
obviously
locals.
Hypernomics applies to and brings value to, which I know we're going to peel back the layers of the onion.
Yeah.
But maybe you could provide a little bit of an overview of what Hypernomics is.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to get to it is the way I first discovered it. So the way I found this stuff out was that, and for those of you who have significant others, it pays to pay attention to what they're actually saying and what they're doing. And so I was out doing, of all things, looking for a washing machine with my wife. And we went into this big box store and we rolled up to these washing machines. And she says, I like this machine here. It's got a bigger drum than we have at home. And I thought, capacity, and then it's going to have a price, capacity versus price. And she said, the one we have at home only has one gentle cycle. I like to have more cycles on this machine. And I thought, cycles versus price. So she's got cycles and capacity and price. She's up to a 3D problem. So we saw this first machine and we liked it a lot, both of us. And of course, if you go into these big stores, they've got the next model up, the next model up, and they get bigger and bigger and better and better. And so we went to the next model. I said, well, what about this one? And she says, it's too expensive. We can't afford it. And then I realized that we were going to be one unit that was going to push the quantity for this thing out, one unit, and then against the price curve. So we were part of the quantity problem too. And so what my wife was doing there was she was weighing out the capacity, the cycles, the price, and we were part of the quantity thing. And so she was doing this 4-dimensional juggling act in her head, on the fly, and figuring out what we were going to buy. And then I realized that everybody in the store was doing the same thing. Mm. And so then I raced home and been proving this out for the last 12 years. That's what people do. Interestingly, I actually discovered that ants do this too. So after I wrote the book, just after I finished the book, I was out, I did a run. It was at the end of a trail, and I parked up onto this asphalt, and I was looking down, and I saw a little reddish-black ant, and I realized that Richard Feynman had studied ants for a long time. The Nobel Prize-winning physicist brought us quantum mechanics. And I started to study this little red-black ant. He's starting to do this counterclockwise circle. He's doing it in fits and starts, and he kind of goes around, and he does a 360-degree turn, and he's out just a little bit further than where he started. And then he does it again, and again he's doing little fits and starts. He comes around, he's still out further, and he does it one more time. And I realized that as he's making these stops, he's up on top of these little relatively high peaks, the little high parts of the pebbles and the asphalt. And he gets around there, and I realized he's expanding his view, and he's standing up on the top of the rocks. That little ant was doing surveillance. So I raced home and I type in ant surveillance into my search bar and I hit it. And it turns out that ants do surveillance. And what they do, for all of your people that look at real estate, ants look for new places to live. And they do that with these little guys who are doing reconnaissance for their whole colony. And they're looking for places that are away from other people. So when this gets back to square footage for, being quiet areas, and look for nice flat rocks that have the right gap from top to bottom, that are dry and hygienic and near food sources and near water sources, but away from other people. So these ants are doing four-dimensional problems in their head too. Now these ants have lived on the Earth for 140 to 180 million years, which means that we've been doing four-dimensional problems since there's been humans, because we're at least as smart as ants. So what's really exciting about this is that you can use this now for real estate. So in an example that's one of our prime examples here is there's a guy that built a house in Alpine, New Jersey. Alpine, New Jersey is the easternmost part of New Jersey. It's along the Hudson River, really fine properties out there. And this guy built this property and he wanted to sell it for $69 million. Well, it's close to Manhattan. Maybe it's worth it. Well, we did some analysis of some other houses out there, which would be kind of like looking back to the washing machines, taking all the washing machines that are out there and figure out what the washing machines are worth based on their capacity and their cycles and whatever else is important to people in washing machines. But in case of the real estate, it's the square footage, the lot size, and how new it is, right? And so we did some analysis and we crank it through our software. And it turns out that our analysis of this house said it should be worth closer to $25 million. And he had it at $69 million. And long story short, this guy held this house for a dozen years before it finally cleared at a price very close to what we predicted it should have been at the beginning. So this technique lets you figure out the true value of things based on how everybody else is looking at it. And what it wants to do is it wants to take out your biases that you might have for a certain particular business deal. You may think that something's going to work really well and that it won't work as well as you had hoped because you hadn't done your research on what it was worth, or in some cases, how much could the world afford of this? So I know you live up in near Sacramento, over in Reno, just to the little bit north and east of you. There was an outfit up there that was started called Aerion, A-E-R-I-O-N, Aerion. And they were going to build the world's first supersonic business jet. And so they went ahead and they put a bunch of money aside to build it. There was going to be like $4 billion to build it. And we did a little estimate, and that said it was probably okay. And they said they came up with a price. They said, we're going to sell it for $120 million. Said that, the price based on the fact that people really like speed, it was worth that too. But then they said they were going to sell 300 of these guys in 10 years and 500 overall. So we did a little analysis, and so they launched, and they had 20 orders when they launched. And for those of you that follow aerospace, you might know that companies like Airbus and Boeing, when they launch, they have typically hundreds of orders, so that they're guaranteed they're going to make a profit. So Aerion launches with just 20 orders. And then 5 years later, they still had just the 20 orders. So I did some analysis, and it said that the limit, which we call a frontier, the limit when they started was 47, and the limit was moving in their direction. The limit moved to 63 5 years later, but they wanted to sell 300. So I wrote a little piece on LinkedIn that says, worth every penny, not enough pennies. And then I got a really angry response from somebody I knew that I used to work with at Lockheed, who would now work for them. And he said, we just got this big order in and you're all wet. And I said, well, your order's still far short where you're going to be. It's probably for options. They're not firm, so good luck to you. And then 6 months later, they went bankrupt. And so they basically just took $1 billion and just lit it on fire, or maybe $2 billion. I don't know how much they spent on it, but it was effectively just lighting the money on fire. Just like when that other guy was priced his thing too high, he was basically sitting on all that depreciation for 12 years and the carrying costs and the insurance and everything else that he had to pay, the taxes, because he didn't understand what the thing was worth.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I can assume what I think hypernomics solves in terms of problems, but from your perspective, what would you say hypernomics is solving as a problem or aiming to solve in the landscape that you guys are applying hypernomics?
Well, the name of the book that we have is it's Hypernomics using hidden dimensions to solve unseen problems. The point you bring up there, Matt, is that most of the time, like that guy up in Reno, most of the time, and the guy over in Alpine, New Jersey, they don't see the problem.
Yeah.
They think they have the answer already. So the first thing to do is to be able to characterize the problem so you can solve it. And so in a case, the simplest case was during COVID. As you know, here in California, COVID hit and the restaurants, indoor seating was shut down, but you could sit outside. Now here in Southern California, I don't know what it's like up in the winter of 2020 for you, but down here, it's fairly comfortable and you put heaters out and you could sit outside. And we have a favorite restaurant that we went to. And they had a really nice capacity inside, but their outside was just a fraction of what the inside seating was. And so we would go there on Friday nights like we did, and the line would be out the door to get in. Everybody spaced 6 feet apart. And I saw this a couple of times, and I came to the manager and said, "Hey, Kayla, do you want to figure out how to make more money here?" We said, "Sure, Doug, what do I do?" I said, "You see," she had like all these tables for 6, 3 tables for 6, I think, and 3 tables for 4. And she only had a few tables for 2. She had basically a seating area for 30 people. She used to have it for over 100. I said, "What you need to do is you need to change out the tables for 6 and 4 for some tables for 2. Now, why is that? Well, it turns out that the average party size, the number of people, parties of 2, is more than twice as many parties as it is. It's twice as much as there are parties of 4. The restaurant industry has actually studied this. And so what you want to do is you want to have the arrangement match what you're going to get for an audience. And so she basically took out the big tables, put in some small ones, and the revenue shot up 25% in 2 months. So just a really simple thing about trying to figure out what you're up against. You have to see the problem to solve the problem.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned this, idea of hypernomics uncovering hidden dimensions within all different types of markets, right? Could you elaborate on what these hidden dimensions are and how they impact market behavior or consumer behavior or business behavior?
Yeah, well, the dimensions will change from market to market, but for example, here, this is a view of the stock market. And this is mostly on radio, right? So I'm going to show it to you visually so you can see it. But in the stock market, if you were to pull the data down for the stock market every day, this is for the Dow 30. What you would see is if you were to plot the quantity in one direction and the price in the other direction, what happens here is there's a demand limit that's out there. So there's only a certain number of people that can buy stocks, and so there's a limit to how much the stock market can sell.
Yeah.
And then over here, this is what we actually do for our fund. We have a fund that we've built 50 months ago, and it's doing twice what the S&P 500 is doing, only using S&P 500 stocks. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out what things are worth. And so in this case, we're looking at what it's worth relative to its earnings per share and its return on assets. And so there's lots of features go into what holds up the price of the stocks. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to assemble these things into this software, and the software does all the heavy lifting for you. I mean, once we train you how to use the software, you can actually start to see these things appear. And now having discovered this, I can tell you when I first came up with it, I go, what the hell does 4-dimensional stuff mean? And what it means is that these are mathematical dimensions. And so everything starts at 0 and it goes away from an origin. Like if you can imagine it, you're at the South Pole. If you went in one direction, you might be going into Argentina's claim on Antarctica. If you went in the other direction, you might be going into Australia's. But what you're not doing is you're not having any negative numbers. And so it's like taking this whole system, like take down to the South Pole, instead of calling it 90 degrees south, you just call that zero, and everything goes away from zero at that point. It's basically like the origin. It's like the Big Bang for the economy. Everything starts at zero and goes away from zero at that point right there. And so this is very much like the Big Bang theory for physics. It's the origin story of economics. It starts at zero and goes away from there. And the way you can get away from this is that if you don't need to have negative dimensions. If you have more costs than you have revenue, you just show, you know, one feature being more than the other, but you know that you have both are non-negative. So that helps you get away from having to create spaces to accommodate that kind of stuff. So it's very useful to, you know, real estate, investing, building cars, building planes, selling steaks, for example. Like, for example, maybe you have a restaurant. You can sell the steak in, say, Newport Beach, California. Same quality steak, you can sell it for more than you can in Victorville, California, because the income is higher there. And so what this does is it separates out what it is worth, whether a product is worth by the zip code. So, for example, maybe you like beer. I like beer, and every once in a while I'll have a nice beer, and I'll go into some place that's, you know, a pretty inexpensive town, but then it's got a very expensive beer, and then you see there's not too many people in the place, and you think, hey, this beer is overpriced. And then you might go to some place that's pretty wealthy, like Carpinteria. You probably know where that is, down along the coast, because you went to UCSB. Well, Carpinteria is a really high-end town. And then you find some beer that could fetch $9 for a pint, and they've got it at $6. And so you say, well, that's probably underpriced, and you could actually test this stuff out to see what it would be worth, so that you don't lose money on that. What you want to do is you want to get the optimal amount of a product sold based on your ability to figure out what it's worth. So
yeah. Now, how can the average individual or business leverage hypernomics in a day-to-day or a year-to-year basis to create wealth, or to solve unforeseen problems maybe in their marketplace? What is the real world application of this for somebody that maybe doesn't have that type of experience in this particular type of field?
Well, what they could do is they could hire us, and then we'll have some people that are going to be trained by us. We're just starting to reinitiate training classes. But in fact, my publisher, Wiley, is marketing this as a textbook. And so it's our hope that this will become first a unit in college, and then become a class in college, and then maybe a concentration, and eventually a major at university. And so what we want to do is we want to train people to be able to do this for themselves. But right now, selfishly, we would tell people, if you want to get some insight, you don't want to take the time to figure this out for yourself, we already have a decade's worth of experience doing this, and we could help you out right now by trying to figure out what the problem is, how to solve it, so that you're optimized for what it is that you're doing, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So here in California, again, you and I know that we're building a bullet train here in California, right? And the bullet train is going to have to be in quotation marks, because they're not making the track as fast as they make it for Europe, let alone Japan or China. China's got bullet trains that are going 260 miles an hour. Our bullet train's not going to go nearly as fast. And they're also right now, they wanted to originally be from San Francisco to LA, which are two pretty good population centers, but they got it stopping along the way. And so there's too many stops for this, perhaps. I mean, if you take the bullet train from London to Paris, it stops once in between. If you go from London to Brussels, it stops one in between. It doesn't have a bunch of stops, because that takes the bullet out of the bullet train. Right. So there's a value to the speed that you have to figure out. And even with the value in there, the state, by our analysis, has actually underpriced the tickets, because they want to get people on there. So their proposed, well, they don't have any train to drive yet, but their proposed price is too low. And so this seems to be destined to be a a loss leader for the state. I know that it wants to be a legacy for the previous administrations and everything. And their heart's in the right place, but their wall is they're going to find that the wall is not going to be big enough to pay for this thing in the long run, and it's not going to recoup its cost. The reason the bullet trains work in London and Paris is because the population centers are enormous in both of those places. Or Shanghai to Beijing, you've got millions upon millions of people to rely upon to keep that thing fully loaded.
Yeah.
But we don't have quite that population here in this state, and I think we're going to find that's going to fall apart for that reason.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, you shared a little bit on, some real world examples with the restaurant that you helped,
Yeah.
right? The real estate investor. Mm-hmm. What other interesting real world examples or case studies come to mind where Hypernomics has been successfully applied to achieve significant results?
Well, I can't tell you everything we do because, like they say in defense, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. But we helped a major defense company that was doing a competition. They were in a competition, and it turned out that another company was effectively buying the solution to this problem that the government had. And the company for which we were working was pouring in millions into this, and we told them to stop, so we saved them millions of dollars. We worked with another company that makes spaceships, and we told them, what kind of spaceship to make for their particular effort that they have. And we're working for an aerospace company that was making a small general aviation plane, and it turned out that their plane was underpriced, and we told them that they could sell the thing for significantly more than they had it priced at, and they would have been successful, but they lost the courage of their convictions and they shut it down. So that didn't work out too well for them. But those are just a few of the places in which we've applied it successfully. Right now, we're working with a company to show. A friend of the company is making a teardrop trailer that he wants to put up, and we're going to show what it's worth based on how the market reacts to high-end quality and low weight at the same time. So there's another real-world example that we're using it for. In the past, I'm sorry, we also showed how a helicopter was undervalued. We came up with a helicopter report and showed how the particular model in question was underpriced by about 25%. Wow. And that 10 years passed, and now we have data on what the used helicopters are worth. And if you take the price of a used helicopter, discount it from what it was back then, and it shows that we were exactly right. And so this manufacturer was fat, dumb, and happy because they're selling the helicopters hand over fist because it's underpriced. But in the process, they may have lost several $1 million in profit because they hadn't charged full boat for that.
Wow.
So there's a lot of ways to get at different problems for different people, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here, is to show clients what they can do with this technology in their field when they're up against something, and sometimes they may not even know what they're up against, and so it's our hope that it'll become more ubiquitous, so that businesses and governments don't make mistakes as they've made in the past by undervaluing something, overvaluing something, supposing there was more demand than there was, or underestimating demand. This is all designed to figure out what something is doing over time. The way we like to think of it is, if you take a soccer ball and you kick it, so the soccer ball might be the region of things that are viable. If you think about that, a viable solution. The upper side of the soccer ball might be what it's worth, the price, and the lower side of the soccer ball might be its cost. So if you think of a soccer ball, you kick it, and maybe the distant pass for that soccer ball as it approaches you, maybe you see the soccer ball 2 seconds away, and then you see it a second away, and then in the present, you see where it is right now. So you've seen it from 2 seconds, 1 second, in the present. Well, when the soccer ball is kicked, unless it's acted upon by another force, 2 seconds, 1 second present, it's probably going to be here in the next second. And that's basically what we're trying to do with Hypernomics. We've got the market in the distant past, the near past and the present, and that helps us predict the near future.
Mm.
So that's really all we do with the stocks is we predict the near future based on the distant past and present to figure out the near future, and then we work with that. And the same thing would apply to virtually any field that you look at.
Right.
Now, businesses such as yours might have cyclical things going on, and we've also could work out the cycles doing that. We can work out how to anticipate cycles by figuring out what the cycles were in the past.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
And is there an industry or space that this wouldn't apply to, or is this universal? And
well, it probably doesn't work too well for what we call single feature commodities. So like gold won't work for gold. Iron ore. Iron ore is a good example of what we call the law of supply and demand, which has been around for 100 years, which basically says there's, as the costs go up to mine it, the supply curve that reflects those costs has a slope to it. It's upward sloping, and it's going to intersect the demand curve. And there might be only one price in the world for iron ore. And so if iron becomes more dear, people want more iron, they start to put on the mines that are progressively more costly to accommodate that demand. And then if the demand falls off, those are the first mines to go, are the ones that are more costly. And then they settle at an equilibrium price. So that works for iron, gold, platinum, oil, things like that. Those are single feature commodities. But anything else that's got any kind of value to it. So iron ore goes into cars. And so cars there's hundreds, if not thousands of miles of cars right now. So it works for the auto industry, but it doesn't work for the iron that goes into it. So yeah, single feature commodities doesn't work too well for them.
now, does hypernomics make sense for, small mom and pop businesses or investors, or is this more for the medium size enterprise level organizations? Or is this something that, is top down, useful and available for any small business or mom and pop individual?
I think how we're going to track over time, Matt, is it's going to be kind of like the Microsoft model. You remember when Microsoft came out and they came out with the first Office, and Office wasn't collected as Office. You had to buy the Excel module, which 30 and 40 years ago, it cost like $400 to get Microsoft Excel, and you had to buy Word, and you had to buy PowerPoint, and they're all several $100s a piece. And so what happened at the beginning is businesses were using it, and so it wasn't used as frequently for the household. And then as time went on, people got more and more used to it, and more people got it. So now you take this bundle that might have cost $1,200 in 1990, which would be, $3,000 or $4,000 right now. Well, now that thing's down to a few $100s for the whole bundle, and that's how we see it happening. So to answer your question, we think the medium to large size businesses are the best candidates for this right now. But then it's going to start to neck down when people start to understand it. When people go to school and pick this class up that's going to be formed for it, they'll be able to do it for themselves. It's going to be just as easy as doing. It'll be as easy for the people to do it as working out the books for a business might be. It'll be the analyst here will be doing stuff that kind of mimics what accountants do internally, except these people are looking externally to see how people view products in general and your product in specifically. So that's kind of what we're trying to get to.
Very cool. Now, how do you envision the future of hypernomics evolving, or maybe share a little bit more about the industries that you're most excited of seeing it get applied to right now that maybe it hasn't to in the past?
Well, interestingly, I went to a local university that's very large. That's in the same system that you are, but I'm not going to name, so you can guess who that is. And I went to the graduate school, and I talked to two professors there. One I met in person. Well, he refused to read the book. I think he was afraid of it. Another guy booted me out, off a call. He said, "Don't talk to me anymore." And they basically said to me, "Well, nobody's going to pick this up unless it's been in industry for 10 years." Well, right about now, it's hitting industry in 10 years. So I'm hoping the evolution of this, Matt, would be that we show this to a few big companies, they get results, people get excited by results, people get drawn to the technology, it starts to be demanded at university, because it's a textbook right now. It's a very simple textbook. It's written to the 11th grade level.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to have people pick it up and start to apply it in university. And we think that in 5, 10, or 20 years, this will be ubiquitous throughout the industry, throughout schools, because it really supplants most of what we see from what's now called modern economics, that law of supply and demand, where that one equilibrium point.
Yeah.
Well, that works with those single feature commodities that we're talking about, but for you to estimate anything else, you need to have the more dimensions here. And this technique, which, again, frankly, I didn't understand when I first saw it, so it takes a while for people to adapt to it. But once you have been inured in it for 2-3 months, that's about how long it took me to really realize. I had to keep looking at what the definition of dimension was in my on my computer screen. Dimension, physical, upright, left, front, back. Or in math, it's just the extent of something. So when you took your old high school algebra, you had x and y, and x, y goes like up and down, and x goes this way. Well, those things aren't really tied to space, and that's the way I came to think of it, is that your old algebra stuff wasn't tied to space. This isn't either. It's tied to economic space. That x and y you had was tied to itself. It had no meaning outside of a physical area, and that's kind of what this is. And it's going to take a while for people to be able to adapt to this type of thinking. But I've got a small group of people that understand it right now, and we're trying to expand that group. So we think the world will be a better place for it. So interestingly, the governments can use this. So in 2014, the state of California and the state of Colorado and Washington State both legalized recreational marijuana in 2014. Now, Washington State has a third more people than Colorado. But at the end of the year, Colorado had $350 million in revenue, recreational revenue from marijuana tax, and Washington State had 50. They had 7 times what Washington State did. Now, Colorado's tax was about 30%, and Washington State's was 108.
Interesting.
And so what this does is it helps the governments figure out the shape of demand curves so that you don't make silly decisions. So in California here, I haven't tested it yet, but I'm pretty certain that the demand curve for taxpayers, it's a funny thing to think about, but you want people to pay your taxes. So you've got a demand curve for taxes, and people seem to think I'll just keep adding tax and I'll always get more people. Well, it's probably not the case. If you keep adding tax, some people are going to exit, and in fact, those might be the people that are paying most of the freight there. Mm-hmm. It may be the case that what you want to do is to have the tax rate lowered so you can draw more people in and make more revenue, and that's something that you would want to be able to test by having these techniques available to you, so that you could actually know for sure instead of having to guess. That we don't want to guess.
Absolutely, making it more quantifiable.
Yes.
You've talked a few times about the tech. What is the tech?
Oh, the tech is, it's called, our software is called Hypernomica. You can find it on our website, www.hypernomics.com, hypernomics.com. And the software, basically, once you put some data into it, which we condition through Excel, so you have to have it has to be just so to go into the machine. But the software will help you figure out what the relationships are in any kind of market so that you can make better decisions for yourself.
Wow.
So that's the tech right there, is the software. And that's what we've used to beat the S&P 500 for the last 4 years, 2 months. We've been using that software to figure out how to beat the S&P 500. And we've done only using S&P stocks. As of yesterday, we were 2x the S&P 500, only using their own available equities. So it's pretty powerful stuff, and the more you learn about it, the more you can do with it, just like anything.
I would imagine that Wall Street would be very interested in that, as would the retail investor trader be very interested in leveraging that tool.
Sure. Yes, I'm pretty sure they will be. We've got a few sniffs right now, and one thing I learned over being at Lockheed is trying to keep things under wraps. So we published 13 papers, but we did it mostly in journals that they weren't business journals, they were aerospace journals or automotive journals. And so we get the same people that are qualified to review it. A lot of people that have big math, have a lot of math background, a lot of PhDs would review this. And so it's been stamped off 13 times now. And of course, Wiley put out the book. So it's going to come, whether or not people are ready for it, it's coming. And that little university down from, just a little ways away here, they may not want to see it, but it's coming.
What's your vision for Hypernomics, and why are you so passionate about this at this stage of your life, your career? Why are you doing this?
Well, I saw, probably as you did, you're old enough to remember the 2008 financial crisis. Had this tech been widely adopted, and had the rating agencies been, had a rating agency been, using this tech and actually had the honest opinion of the equities that were for sale, and that would rate it appropriately, and had the people been, had the people that are issuing mortgages had stricter guidelines. But had there been a rating agency that could actually rate this correctly, and people started to say, oh, everybody else is rating this at, say, 95 plus, and then somebody rated at 60, well, who's right and who's wrong? Well, if they'd understood that the one that was rating it at 60 is basically what the Big Short was all about, things that were rated in the 90s should have been rated, several points lower than that, maybe 10 or 20 points or 30 points lower. This is going to stop artificially induced depressions. So I submit that the depression from 2008 was artificially induced. Had the Federal Reserve Bank known about this stuff in 2020, what's been underreported in the news is, as COVID hit us and people that were going out of work, the banks just decided, well, we don't want anybody to go without cash. So instead of adding just a few percentage points to the money supply every few months or few years, they cranked it up by 400%, 4x in 2 quarters.
Yeah.
And that's why we still see this inflation. There's just too many dollars out there. And so if the Federal Reserve Bank had this in their pocket just a few years ago and understood it, well, maybe they would have cranked it up by 40% instead of 400%, and maybe we wouldn't have this inflation we have right now. So my vision for this is that the world uses this, businesses fail less often. Right now, Dr. Clayton Christensen out of Harvard says that 95% of all new business ideas fail. Well, another way of looking at it is 5% succeed. And so what happens is, a few years down the road, that 5% is going to grow to 6%. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but going from 5 to 6, that's a 20% improvement. It'll go from 5 to 6 to 7 to 8, maybe all the way up to 10. So that means the business failures or product failures are halving. And businesses will start to fail less frequently. And governments will start to flourish. That's my belief, is that the depressions the swing in depressions will start to dampen, and the frequency will start to extend. And that's how I see it going forward.
Amazing. Now, how are you planning on getting this in front of the world governments and the amazing businesses that are driving innovation and the small business owners' hands? What's the plan around that?
Well, the idea is to be on podcasts such as yours right here, Matt, and to have people see this. This is the idea, is to get it out in front of people. So that's what we're trying to do.
Amazing. Now, for those that want to learn a little bit more about Hypernomics, they want to learn about the tech, they want to read the book, they want to read some of your publications, what's the best place for them to do that, Doug?
Well, they're all located at the company website, which is hypernomics.com, hypernomics.com. Also, you can go to doughowarth.com. That's my personal website. And you can find the book, Hypernomics, Using Hidden Dimensions to Solve Unseen Problems, that you can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and at Wiley's site. So
we'll be sure to link all of that up on Doug's episode at millionairemindcast.com. Doug, one, I want to thank you for coming on today. This
Yeah.
very insightful, very intriguing,
Very
very
good.
exciting. And I would love to ask, in a perfect world, in 10 years, where do you see Hypernomics, and what do you see that impact being, on the world in terms of your vision?
I think in 10 years, it's going to be a college major. That would be my vision for it, that you could major in hypernomics and people would be chomping at the bit to get you just as much as they're chomping at the bit to get electrical engineers right now. That's my vision for the thing. That's my hope.
Doug Howarth, thanks for coming on the show.
Josh, Matt, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.